about a few of the different areas that here's what your strategy really needs to be, and education is a key part of that. And so I'll talk a little bit about what we have, and I'll talk about a few of the other key areas here. So the CSA Guidance Research, we started the organization basically with guidance, and we have 13 different domains that we think the main issues and the best practices fall in. And roughly it falls into three main areas: understanding this architecture, understanding the nuances of multiple clouds, then understanding the different domains which fall under governance, legal, risk management, compliance, information and lifecycle management, the ability to be portable and interoperable, and then operating. What are the data center issues? What are the patch management issues? What are the encryption issues? How do we harden virtualization? So this is something we actually have launched. We're just in the very early stages of launching version 3 of that research, which is going to be a high priority for us throughout this year. And so you're welcome to go to our website, be part of the debate, be part of this joint working group, and help us make it even better. So some of the key highlights on what is in this, and I encourage you to read the document if you haven't already. The existing one's 80 pages, and who knows how much that we've learned a lot, so who knows how big version 3 is going to be. But what we've learned certainly is that today the engagement, the procurement phase is just so critical, and there's a lot more flexibility than you might imagine, because there's a lot of hunger from the cloud provider's perspective to get service level agreements that you need to be able to get contract language that fits. But it's important that you have this overall architectural understanding, because again, you're going to have multiple clouds, and you don't look at any provider in isolation to what your overall architecture is. Certainly, there's a lot of principles from outsourcing and vendor management that we can use, and this is something that we just need to understand. It sort of becomes outsourcing on steroids for some sort of software as a service, that they have an option to move much more quickly, and may have your provider themselves, they're going to be a customer of another cloud provider, and they're going to have a lot of the same issues you're dealing with. So you've got to understand all those downstream issues and how they're managing all of those different things. Certainly, being able to understand the data location, being able to get a right to audit when possible, that's a good thing tactically to ask for now. It's not the long-term solution. But these sorts of things are pushing the transparency issues, where a cloud provider will say, no, I can't really give you the right to audit. You can't just, here's the keys to Google's data center. Go in there, help yourself, go look around. That's not going to happen. But it will drive them to give you more additional compensating answers and say, well, you can't do that, but here's more information we can provide you. An important principle for security professionals is to actually take that argument of we're saving a lot of money and say, well, how about we invest some of that in insurance of this new shift, this new paradigm, and make that a principle within your organization to reinvest. Some of the highlights from an operational perspective is certainly we expect an explosion in encryption, but it's got to be encryption that is integrated and instrumented with identity management, and it's really the key management issue is the bigger one. We've got great encryption protocols that are out there, algorithms, but this segmentation and this separation between the provider where possible. And if you work with cloud, you would say that's easy to do with infrastructure as a service because it's raw storage, so yeah, that's easy to encrypt information. What about software as a service? Well, there's interesting things that are happening, format preserving, encryption, and tokenization, that actually are creating the ability to encrypt information in the applications without breaking the application. So we have a lot that's going on there. So there's definitely a lot more. Certainly there's principles on how you harden virtual machines. But I think probably one of the biggest things when people only have a couple minutes with me and ask, well, what I need to be looking at doing with this provider is, expect there's going to be bad things that you need to be dealing with, so make sure you have really good logging capabilities. are they providing it, or you need to build that on yourself? It's been one of the most common things that has come back is that I had an issue, or I think I had an incident. It was internal. It could have been just a mistake or a broken process, but I can't get the login information. I need to be able to track that down. So, and those things are definitely being improved. So, as I've said, identity management is huge, and I think it comes down to if you're an enterprise federation, and if you're not doing a good job federating your identities internally, it's going to be hard to extend a broken system out to 30 different software service providers. And so we need to look at how we can federate that. And things like SAML and making sure that your software service provider supports that, OpenID, those are some strategies that allow us to have one directory system that doesn't force us to create a mess and have all our user account information in a lot of different cloud providers. So all of that, if you've read through all of that, you might want to look at our CCSK certification, which is a user certification that basically it's an online web test that tests that. But beyond you doing that yourselves, I think it's important to look at partners and look at your ecosystem, because user certifications, we know they don't make someone an expert overnight. But we're at the stage here where we've got to create a baseline level of awareness, and we've got to all be speaking the same language. And so that's really the reason why we did this. It was not to really become a certification haven. It's sort of a tactic to that strategy of moving awareness and knowledge about cloud to the next level. So, but definitely you can look into that. So education is very important, and I'm pointing out some of our resources. There are a lot of other resources out there, and we don't claim to have all the education in the world around this. We're trying to help, but it's an important area, and that's a key priority. But moving as part of your strategy, certainly we've got to have some sort of a framework and that is specific to cloud. And it's not as though the frameworks that you might already have, your information security management system, is necessarily antiquated, but if we can create some sort of fusion between frameworks that are more specific to cloud, then we've got a better chance to have a good strategy for extending our enterprise into the cloud. So what we offer up is something we have, which we've had released for about a year now, is the Cloud Controls Matrix. And this is a free spreadsheet you can go download, but we tried to look at, from scratch, what are information security controls which are important to have in cloud environments. And a lot of them will look like familiar controls. But what we try to do is look at what becomes more important in this multi-tenant environment. It's not a lot, it's 98 controls. We tried to map it through if you're ISO fan, COBIT, other things, if you've got to be PCI compliant. That the purpose of this is to take your existing knowledge and about controls frameworks and apply that to cloud. So we think it can help both from a IT side, a risk management side, to the audit regulation side. It gives us, again, a common language and a way to basically take our existing ideas about how we secure legacy IT systems into cloud. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about frameworks when I talk about future things. From an assessment perspective, when this is sort of that broken down, that layered model of cloud, is to really understand what is the difference from an assessment. When you're doing security assessments, risk assessments, you need to understand that this is, in all cases, it's a shared responsibility. But certainly for infrastructure, it's more you being you, the enterprise. If you're a cloud provider, it's the other guys. Depends on who you are here. But certainly it is something where you're given a very basic, flexible platform, and the trade-off for that flexibility is, in fact, that you have the responsibility to make sure that's managed in a secure way. As you move up the stack, more and more of those security decisions are or should be made by the cloud provider. But even in that case, you don't escape responsibility. From an assessment perspective, it's still very important, but you're assessing that party instead of assessing what your own team is doing. And it's very important that the contract language, as you go up the stack, becomes more important that it's in the contract because you don't have that direct control. But even as I was mentioning, there's aftermarket sorts of format preserving encryption and maybe logging things that you can be doing to add additional security, additional controls to a software as a service solution. But it's important to understand that difference. So having said that, we have another project, again, it's been released. We have this, it's a free spreadsheet we've had out since October, which is a consensus assessments initiative questionnaire, 140 or so questions. Basically, they're common sense questions. They're also checking for the presence of controls that we've articulated in our controls matrix. And it's something that's ready-made that you don't need to reinvent. You can use it as part of the assessment, as well as you can use some of the language in there in contracts. So it's ready-made. I've seen almost every major provider you can think of has had to answer to our questionnaire. So there's a body of work out there. They're familiar with it out there. But you can use this. You can use a portion of the controls or the questions here, and it's a ready-made assessment tool that's out there. And again, this is something we see organizations taking in their region and it being customized region to region, jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So finally, I want to go through just a short number of slides to talk about some of the things that we think are very important, fundamental to the future. So Cloud Audit is a project of CSA that, I don't know if it's the best name for it, maybe it is, maybe it's not, but essentially it's an open standard to allow providers to actually automate control assertions and assert the different controls that they have in a way that they can do this once and allow either you manually or from a machine-to-machine perspective to actually compile that information. And the idea is that we've got to get auditing out of the data gathering business and the data analysis business, and we want cloud providers to focus on providing good security and not necessarily answering a lot of redundant audits. So the idea here is that from a web browser, you could do an HTTP GET with a specific standard language you've used and be able to pull down current information from that provider related to any different sort of control assertion that might be more technology-based, like versioning of certain technology that by nature of how it's configured, you wouldn't be able to get that automatically. Or maybe it relates to employee hiring practices or things like that. But it's all out there in a well-known namespace, and you'd be able to pull that information down very quickly. Or you could have compliance tools, systems that would actually be able to pull that information automatically and build for you sort of your risk charts and your dashboards to help you understand where things are going. So then as I was talking about, certification is great. Continuous GRC is more important and better and fundamental in the future. That's where we're going with this. Trusted Cloud Initiative is another thing we're doing where, again, we started with the governance issues and the best practices on a higher level, and now what we're looking to do is getting more and more detail-oriented and provide more technical answers for you. So Trusted Cloud Initiative, what they are building is a pretty comprehensive security reference architecture. The initial focus is identity management, quickly grew beyond that, but identity management continues to be a very important part of this to provide some very good architectures for how you do the federation that I was talking about before, because the dynamics of the world are you're going to have a small number of infrastructure and platform as a service providers. We're going to have millions and millions and millions of software as a service companies that maybe tons of employees, a small number, and all of them are going to be competing for business. And we've got to federate identities with them and not give them identities. And so that's a key part of this. But It's fairly comprehensive reference architecture that we released sort of a draft one preview of at RSA, and over the next couple of months we'll see some more detailed white papers around this. That's just a high level. If I were to show you the full architectural block diagram, you guys would all get up and leave right now because it's pretty big. But basically, we try to leverage existing architectures that are out there: TOGAF, ITIL, Service Management, Jericho Forum, and create sort of a comprehensive way to build security architectures that span multiple clouds that also address those controls requirements in our controls matrix. Another project is security as a service. So a lot of what I've been talking about is how do we secure the cloud. And it's not fun, it's all that sort of thing. The very exciting thing is, in sort of the second half of our mission statement for CSA from the very beginning, was actually to look at how can we use the cloud to better secure the rest of the world. With this increased mobility, we're going to have new paradigms for how we do that. And you think about the patching problem, think about the antivirus database management issue, that the ability, for example, to be updating threat databases in a single area and having this world sort of connected and everyone pulling from those sorts of things in real time, it's going to create a lot cleaner world for policy management. It's going to create a lot more agile threat response world and incident response. So what we're doing here is actually trying to imagine building the information security industry from the ground up and say what are the services that can be cloud delivered, because we think it's all going to be cloud delivered. Doesn't mean that the security companies and partners you're working with are going away far from it, but it's going to mean those services are going to be delivered in a new way through the cloud. I don't think there's going to be big clients, security clients on iPads, Droid phones. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be, instead of endpoint security, we're going to have next hop endpoint security. CloudCert is a project that we're doing. Cloud Security Alliance is providing this function of being this neutral, trusted, vendor-neutral third party that's providing an umbrella for major cloud providers, emergency response organizations associated with countries or large enterprises to actually create the practices as well as the community to be able to have this very agile and automated incident response to address the issue I talked about earlier. Big company goes in the cloud, they're the target, and the attacks are the symptom to many different cloud providers. So we're working on those processes and practices, and they've had several meetings. We've got some solid ideas for things we can reuse out of ITU and NIST and some other places in terms of protocols for the incident response, and there'll be more on that, but you're definitely welcome to join us. So what do I think Cloud 2.0 looks like and where are we going? Well, one thing I wanted to challenge is when we think about if we do get these standards for brokering of information, we do continue to see Moore's Law make devices more powerful. We look at the high energy costs that potentially an issue for massive data centers, that we may actually see the cloud be more dispersed than we think. What would 5 years from now, when you take Moore's Law, what would you be able to do with an army of iPhones that had some agent on them that in exchange for getting a big break on their phone bill, they're actually a grid-like node in a cloud service? Well, what will that look like? Is that a possibility? I think that we need to think in terms of that being a possibility because it allows us to create better virtualized controls. And if we fall into this trap that everything's going to be centralized into a few large data centers, we're going to get a little bit lazy with our security and go back to this model where we'll build these highly secure fortresses, and that's going to solve our security problems. It's not going to solve our security problems. So I mentioned a few of these, the disruptive technologies. I think we've got great possibility for identity management, providing what I call identity encapsulated encryption, and having a hierarchical model for providing keys that actually work in a very unique and dynamic way that we could unlock all of the country-specific information, or we could unlock a company's information through cloud providers that might be dispersed in a lot of different areas. It's very important for us to understand we can't do things in a very physical fashion, but we could create a virtual Singapore inside of a data center that existed in Los Angeles, or vice versa. We could do that with the technology we have, but identity management is going to be a key part of that. So, I think we are actually going to, it seems like a big thing, but I think we're actually going to see some movement of governments and policies to actually look a lot more similar to support this global cloud economy. That's not been the norm in how we think of the security industry. So whatever the regulators say, we go do that. We figure out how to do that. But I think there's this democratization of IT is actually going to create an ability for us to push back and say, no, we need to change laws. And I think we are going to see some of that. But I think the biggest thing for me when I'm thinking about this is that there are so many of the big cloud IT companies that are going to be the giants a few years from now probably don't even exist today, because so much of that innovation is going to happen by companies in that software as a service layer who don't have any legacy issues to deal with that are holding them back. So going to the cloud, certainly there are challenges, but I think the challenges or the challenges being used as an objection to cloud are overstated. There's a lot of tools that are out there. Waiting's not an option. I talk to a lot of CEOs of software companies. They do not have shrink-wrap software in their long-term vision, I can assure you. It's a lot cheaper for them to go SaaS. So they're going SaaS. So you can't assume, none of us can assume that that's always going to be an option. But we got to understand there's a lot of different cloud types. We got to understand what are the low-hanging fruit, what works good in the cloud today without losing the functionality. We take a good risk management approach, understand the different sensitivity levels. We create private clouds, and we understand how they can burst out to public clouds and can be portable. You take that sort of strategy, we've got to be agile. It's not about waiting for someone else to figure out this problem for us. It's about doing it. So that's my presentation. I want to thank you. I want to let you know that Cloud Security Alliance is just a big social network, and we want you to join in with us and help participate, help on the research, help make the Singapore chapter the biggest, smartest, most innovative chapter in the world, and help us in some of our other global research projects. With that, thank you, and I don't know if we have time for questions, but